So my name is Bill Sparkle, and I'm a spatial ecologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And today I'm going to be talking about sagebrush conservation opportunities within the National Wildlife Refuge System and the National Park System. So we had three questions that I'm going to address as part of this talk today. The first and foremost is, what were the status and trends of core sagebrush areas and growth opportunity areas in parks and refuges? The second question is, how does the local landscape surrounding our parks and refuges reflect or relate to what we're seeing as far as trends within our parks and refuges? And lastly, just what are the top refuges and parks defined by how much core sagebrush areas they contain? So how can we identify where our resources are? So for question one, what are the status and trends of core sagebrush areas? Really simple analysis. We basically took the boundaries of the 46 national wildlife refuges, the 43 national parks that occur within the sagebrush biome, and we use those boundaries to clip the spatial data within the sagebrush conservation design for each time step. And from there, we just tabulated the amount of core growth and other rangeland areas. And so looking at that, each of these vertical bars represents one time step within the sagebrush conservation design. Dark blue is our core areas, light blue is our growth opportunity areas, and then the tan is our other rangeland areas. So this is refuges, and if you look at it, over the past 2 decades, wildlife refuges have lost 225,000 acres of core sagebrush habitat, which is roughly 25% of what we started with at the beginning of the sagebrush conservation design time period. Likewise, if we look at national parks, they've lost 315,000 acres of core sagebrush area, which is really 75% of what they started with back at the beginning of this time series. And, this is just a result of core sagebrush areas transitioning to growth opportunity areas and other rangeland areas, mostly through the result or the effects of invasive annual grass and conifer encroachment. Okay. Question number 2. How does the land surrounding our protected lands within parks and refuges reflect the trends of what we're seeing sort of on those parks and refuges themselves? So for this part of the analysis, we again took those boundary shapefiles that we had, we buffered them out 10 miles or 16 kilometers, pulled the park and refuge out, and did the same analysis on the donut of land surrounding the park or refuge. And so walk through this figure. So we've got refuges on the left, parks on the right. And this is tracking the mean percent core sagebrush area for each time step. The surrounding area is green on top. The refuge or park is in blue. And basically what you can get from this is what's going on the local landscape is reflecting what we're seeing on the parks and refuges. And even though they kind of have a higher sort of protected status relative to some other public lands, that's not protecting us from the effects of invasive annual grass or conifer encroachment, which largely makes sense. Those things don't stop at our fence line. And so just pointing out that, we're not going to be able to just work within our boundaries and think that's going to help us hold the line. It's going to be, efforts that are based and driven by work with our partners on the local landscape. Based on future climate, we pulled out 3 parks and 1 refuge. That list left us with a list of 19 wildlife refuges and 11 national parks. And so when you do this, again, the colors are the same as they've been through all the talks. You're looking at refuges on the left, national parks on the right. Blue is the core, light blue is growth, and the tan is other rangeland areas. But looking at it, if you look at the top 5 refuges or the top 5 parks, that's 90% of all the core sagebrush resources in the system in just those spots. And if you go down to the top 10 refuges or top 10 parks, 98 and 96%. So if we're starting with 90 parks and refuges, you can get down to a very few places on the landscape real quick. And not to bury the lead, if we're going to defend the core and grow the core, this is where we need to put our resources. To add, in the process of doing this and where we are in this point, National Park Service has already changed how they're allocating funds, bill funds and IRA funds to direct more to Creators of the Moon. So now just going to kind of show this spatially on a map and what does this look like and just highlight some of our areas. So this is a change in status map. The warm colors are showing areas that have degraded through time. A little bit of green there is areas that their conditions have improved in time. And then the dark blue, light blue, and tan are those core growth in other areas that just have not changed. And this is going from the first time SEP of the SCD to the last time SEP. So we're looking at Southern Oregon and Northern Nevada. You've got Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, Hart National Wildlife Refuge, and Sheldon National Wildlife Refuge. And if you look at where our refuges are on the landscape, they're right there in those core areas that we have left. So again, getting to defend the core, grow the core, these are spots we want to start to work and then work outward from, like especially into those yellow areas, which are, core areas that have transitioned to growth. Further with this, if we think about what our federal partners are doing, this falls within one of the Bureau of Land Management's restoration landscapes. And so again, it's just highlighting that this is in one of those range-wide important cores. And although you kind of think of parks and refuges not having a huge footprint on the landscape, the places we have are in places that are important to the biome and important to our partners. So we shouldn't really underestimate the impact we could have. Second example, this is Charles M. Russell National Wildlife Refuge and UL Bend National Wildlife Refuge in north central Montana. The refuge sort of spans the Missouri River. Again, not as much change as we saw in the previous slide, but still, some core areas that have transitioned to growth. But this anchors a huge amount of core area going to the Canadian border. And again, it's part of a BLM restoration landscape. Real quickly, looking at Grand Teton National Park, National Elk Refuge, and the Jackson Hole, much smaller local landscape. Key here is almost all the core in that landscape is either in the parks or on the refuges. We really control our own destiny there to protect some really nice high elevation sagebrush. Wrapping up, what are the status and trends? Parks and refuges have lost 500,000 acres of core sagebrush over the last 20 years. Looking at inside the fence versus outside of the fence, we see pretty much the same trends. And, we're not immune to what we're seeing everywhere else in the biome. Very few places have the vast majority of our resources. Again, if we're going to defend the core and grow the core, we have a list of places we need to work. And overall, this information starts to help build a business plan so we can defend the core and grow the core. In the actual manuscript related to this talk, we do a rough assessment of threats, both invasives and conifers. And again, that helps get this business plan together so we can be successful. And with that, I'd like to thank my co-authors, Kevin Doherty, Jeff Warren, and Todd Cross on the refuge or Fish and Wildlife side, and then Tom Roundhouse, Jeff Loneker, and Jordan Spark on the National Park Service side. Thank you.